Hello everybody. This is going to be the first of 4 bonus videos following the release of my Sonic Origins video. The scripts for most of my videos go through a few different revisions as I test new things in the game or go back to fact check. And in this case, I felt that adding in all that info would detract too much from the topic at hand, so I didn't say all that I had planned to in certain sections of that video. But I still wanted to discuss elsewhere, so that's what all those colored asterisks were for in the bottom left corner. Anyway, today we're talking about super and hyper forms, and later about the 2.1 update. So let me preface this for context. Sonic Origins Plus got me thinking a lot about hyperforms, since in its base release, Amy had no visually apparent hyperform. Now, in the video, I ended up saying this. So when transforming now, she'll look exactly the same as before, as there's no after images trailing behind us like with the other hyperforms. The original line was meant to be, so when transforming now, even if she does feel a bit faster, there's no after images following behind us like with the other hyperforms. But I omitted the part about speed because, well, it turns out it isn't really even a factor here. So I was always under the impression that the hyperforms were faster than the superforms. I mean, it just seems like that would be the case, since hyper is more than super. And you would never see them side by side, because you would have to first give up your super form, then do 7 more special stages before unlocking a hyper form. And then these after images would sell you the illusion of a further increased speed. But Amy didn't originally have these, and this is what made me really start paying attention to her formation differences. So here's the test I did. And this is before that 2.1 update, so Hyper Amy looks like Super Amy. And you can tell it really is her hyper form because she grabs 50 rings from this big ring instead of transporting to Hidden Palace. I'll do this first side by side and line it up to the exact frame they touch the ground. Though keep in mind, this isn't a perfect scientifically accurate test, as I do still have to do all the inputs myself. I don't have any experience with TAS, and this is on an unaltered Switch anyway, but I managed to get the 2 runs pretty identical. I chose Mushroom Hill because it's familiar, and doesn't have too many obstacles. And the section where the palette changes is the perfect place to get a sense of both forms' speed. Now I'll play both, overlaid at 50% opacity. I'm amazed I got both runs this close, though you can see some slight segments where their movement changes from one another. But this is enough to convince me that Super and Hyper Amy are exactly the same speed. And you might be thinking, the movements might be different since she isn't officially called Hyper Amy. So here's Tails doing it. And there has been some contention about his 2 forms, so let's try Knuckles. Okay, the one test we're all waiting for. Super versus Hypersonic. It is pretty similar. Of course, there still is that human element of both being played by me. So even if there is a slight difference in acceleration, top speed, or any other factor, it's really not enough to notice or really matter. The hyperform speed is only an illusion, and that's okay, because it never felt off until Amy came by without the after images. So here's her version 2.1 hyperform going on the same track. And that little visual trickery really does wonders. while we're talking about 2.1, I'll quickly address a few other changes. These loops can now be hammer dashed through, which is, well, I would say good, but really, it should have been the default. Here's the new Game Gear aspect ratio. It fills out more of the screen, but it's still not taking as much as it could. The top border is completely unchanged, so it's only stretched horizontally. Looking at Sonic Chaos's title screen, we see perfect squares in the background of the version 2.0 game, but in 2.1, they're a bit rectangular. Now, I don't have my Game Gear handy, so I can't check the actual hardware, but I suspect the squares would be the way it's meant to look. But when put in practice, both ways actually look fine. They added one screen option, and I personally would never use this. There's one for the main game too. And lastly, a mono sound option. Many people reported a sort of echoing from the Game Gear games, so this should fix that. Anyway, that's it for version 2.1, and that's it for the Hyperform discussions. Well, it wouldn't be a completely thorough test without looking at the original game, so I'll leave you with a Sonic 3 and Knuckles test of Super and Hypersonic, and I'll see you next time to discuss Tails and Knuckles.